Canada has a corruption problem. We are seeing major problems within our financial institutions, and the country is losing credibility all across the world, and it starts from the top down. Our corrupt politicians have been allowing our institutions to take advantage of the lack of accountability that we have. Our country is soft on crime right now. We've seen it in some of the other crime stories that I've been updating, but in today's video, we are talking about what's happening at the global scale through our financial institutions, and I do think this is related to our leadership. Before we get into that part of the video, I also have a follow-up from my last video. China and Russia continue to get more friendly. It's going to have an impact on oil, and I think what's happening with them is actually a concerning trend. Before we get into that, don't forget, we do have the Axe the Tax store live. I've got the hats, these shirts, the mugs, the stickers. Remember, only buy this if you can afford it. It is about spreading the message. It is about having the conversation so that we can get rid of the carbon tax. Let's get into today's video.
When Vladimir Putin arrived in Beijing to meet China's leader Xi Jinping, there were plenty of shows of solidarity. China will always be a good neighbor, good friend, said Xi. They agreed to strengthen ties, including military cooperation, but offered few specifics.
Of course, they're going to offer few specifics. They're not going to make their military alliances public to everybody.
China, which has become an economic lifeline to Russia, is under pressure from Washington. U.S. officials have warned China to stop selling technology like microchips to Russia, which it can use to build weapons, or risk Chinese banks being cut out of the U.S. financial system.
Russia wants some help, and China is a little bit reticent about providing that help.
Kurt Volker is the former U.S. ambassador to NATO.
Doesn't seem like they're that reticent. They just met with them and said, no, China and Russia are great friends. And that's the thing. Like, we see all this pressure coming from America. They are just going to find a way. If there's that much money on the table, they're going to find a way. And in this case, BRICS, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of BRICS. Realistically, China and Russia are doing 70-80% of the work when it comes to BRICS. Of course, you've got India. That's their scam department. And then you do have the other countries as well, but they're not really doing much compared to Russia and China.
And says Chinese banks are nervous.
And they don't want to see any kind of alignment with Russia jeopardize its broader economic interests globally.
They don't care.
After years of surging trade between Russia and China, March and April saw a dip compared to the same time last year. Analysts blame China's fears over possible sanctions. In Beijing, people are divided over the relationship. China is getting very close to Russia, says this woman, and I don't think it's a good thing. I think the two countries can have a win-win relationship, says this man. And that's how both of these leaders are selling it. Putin said they also discussed Ukraine, though China is officially neutral on the war. We are grateful to the Chinese friends and colleagues for the initiatives they put forward to solve this problem.
Of course, China's neutral on the war, though. They have nothing to do with it. And at the same time, when it comes to these guys remaining trade partners and building that relationship together, it only makes sense. And we often try to beat up China and Russia for corruption, but now we're about to get into a video about Canada and its corruption and the money laundering that's happening here.
TD says it hopes it can soon work out a resolution to this series of regulatory and law enforcement probes it faces in the U.S. over allegations that the lender was used to launder money. And we've seen reports that these claims are linked to a massive drug smuggling operation in the States, fentanyl said to be involved. TD Bank facing probes by 3 different regulators as well as the U.S. Department of Justice. And the TD itself has admitted that its money laundering controls were inadequate. Our guest says TD is facing a massive fine on top of hundreds of millions of dollars lost in market cap, stock market value, as these allegations came out. But are we looking at a broader culture of money laundering in Canada? We're joined by Matt McGuire, Principal and Practice Leader at the AML Shop. Thanks very much for joining.
I do love that America's cracking down so aggressively on TD Bank and these bank accounts that are alleged led to fentanyl, but they're doing nothing at the border where a lot of these drugs are actually coming in. And I get it. You go after the finances. That makes sense. You go after the finances. That's a great way to do it.
Listen, so our focus really is on helping businesses figuring out what their money laundering risks are and how to protect them from them.
We have heard this for many years. We have this expression, snow washing. Canada is seen as a soft touch when it comes to money laundering compared to other countries. Is this country quite lax?
It is one of the best places in the world to launder money, as it turns out. We have, the awful combination of, anonymous corporations and just a horrible record for convicting and for taking away the money from criminals.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to anonymous corporations, so I am a real estate agent in London, Ontario. Reach out to me in the link below if you want to work with me, my team, all the way across Canada. We can hand select somebody for your area. The reason I bring that up is obviously when it comes to real estate, we see a lot of corporate holdings, and not always, like the BlackRocks of the world. It's mostly just mom and pop people. But the fact is, it is really hard for us to actually get access to who owns these corporations.
Yeah, still a huge problem here. We're talking about the ability to open up corporations in minutes and, the ability to hide behind those structures, behind trusts, behind Nova Scotia corporations, without really ever having to meaningfully identify the people that are making the decisions and are benefiting from that corporation.
Penalties seem to be very low in this country. That seems to be one of the problems.
This is one of the biggest problems with enforcement against financial institutions. When it comes down to it, the amount of tools in FINTRAC, our Financial Intelligence Unit's toolbox, to be able to issue penalties to big banks are just insufficient. I mean, the same penalty of the maximum penalty of $500,000 can apply equally to a small jeweler in a mall as it can to a $1 billion financial institution.
What a surprise. The politicians who are constantly getting accused of corruption and, breaking financial rules and all these things are not in a rush to crack down on financial crime.
And so those tickets don't have a dissuasive effect.
That's interesting. So $500,000 is the maximum penalty FINTRAC, which is the specific money laundering agency, can bring in.
That's right. So $500,000 is the maximum penalty for just about every infraction, from not understanding money laundering risks to not having a good training program. And so you couple that with their approach to examinations of big banks. And so in the case of TD, they looked at 178 accounts of their 27.5 million clients, and so some tiny percentage, right? And so the maximum possible penalty is, how many of those were bad of, 178, and that that number remarkably was 10%, over 10% of the cherry-picked files that showed that things were unreported that appeared to be money laundering.
TD is facing, I think, up to $2 billion in fines in the States right now. So in this case, if it was 10% of the 127 or whatever, let's just say 12 of those accounts were 12 times 500,000, that'd be 6 million. For a bank like TD, 6 million is kind of nothing.
Kind of an apathy on the regulatory frontier. You say the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, in theory, has a group dedicated or had a group dedicated to money laundering, but that has kind of petered out now.
That's right. We had a very specialized group that was focused on this. And the important distinction here is between FINTRAC's role, which is really like writing speeding tickets for going too fast, which is not a big deal if you could just keep paying the tickets and keeping your license. Awesome.
The fact is, Canada is so reliant on foreign money because we produce nothing right now. As a country, we are not productive. We rely on bringing over immigrants, foreign accounts, foreign investors, because we're just not a serious country when it comes to our actual economy. Why is that the case when we as a country could be so wildly productive that we would be one of the top wealthiest nations in the world if we could just put it together?
Philosophy has the power, like institutions in the US have the power to really put you on bank probation. That means limiting the activities you can do, not letting you acquire other banks, and in the meantime, focusing very heavily with specialized resources, looking at things like artificial intelligence in the battle against money laundering. And so if we had that specialized unit here like they have there, this might have been discovered on our own soil. And
the last thing we want is more government control in our life. But the fact is, the country's being run so poorly that this is happening right now.
It is very important, doesn't it? Because it enables dictators around the world to rip off their own people, and fentanyl smugglers, you name it. It is an important thing.
Hugely important, and dovetails with sanctions, right? If we can't get anti-money laundering right, if we don't know who's transacting and whose money is flowing through our system, sanctions become entirely ineffective against Russia, against any other jurisdictions where we have policy imperative. And the only message that seemed to really resound a few years back was that money laundering increases house prices. Somewhere between 5 and 7% of the value of housing is inflated because of illicit funds in our economy fueling those prices.
I found that part really interesting because I have been a real estate agent for years now, and I have yet to come across that faceless Chinese company that comes in and makes the cash offer. And I mean, you hear all the rumors of it, and everybody's got a friend of a friend who the person walked up with the briefcase and offered them too much in cash for their house. But I deal a lot in investment real estate, and it's like that's probably where you'd see it more often. Maybe it happens in pre-construction with condos and other things, but I don't know how big of a problem that is. A larger concern for me is the people who've been coming to the country and then committing mortgage fraud while they're here. And maybe that's some of the illicit funds coming in that they're talking about. And some of this where the money laundering is happening is they're bringing in the illicit funds, committing the mortgage fraud here and buying the house, which is increasing the property prices. What we're finding most often is it's people already here in Canada forging their documents. There's a certain group of people who have been doing it a lot more than others. And then they're using that to get a mortgage and buy a house.
So is it just a cultural thing? Canadians just don't care about this?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the point is we export our violence through this apathy. When it comes down to it, we have the lowest violent crime rate that we've had in over 25 years. And so, the money's being made and the economy's being propped up by money laundering, and it's not politically expedient to go after it.
The Americans have had Canada on a list for being sloppy, a jurisdiction of primary money laundering concern for many years. Could Canada ultimately lose out here if we get labelled internationally as a bad actor or sloppy in our controls?
Absolutely, and listen. In the case of TD, the problem here is well beyond the penalty. The penalty may seem significant. We're talking about nearly $1 billion and probably more in remedial costs.
Yeah, and that of course it's way bigger than just them paying a $2 billion fine, because even $2 billion for a bank like TD is not a super damaging amount of money for them. But the fact is, if we lose our reputation as a serious country, we already are a laughingstock from Trudeau and Freeland, our finance minister, everything. If you factor in now we're looked at a money laundering country specifically, and then we're not productive, and then we're losing our Canadian identity, all these things, it's like this could be a massive problem for Canada down the road. I am a real estate agent in London, Ontario. Reach out to me in the link below if you want to work with me or my team all the way across Canada. Don't forget to get your Axe the Tax merch. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well, and have a great rest of your day.